Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with Adam Purucker. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox. How are you doing today, Adam?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show. You've got an incredible story. You actually got a perfect 1,600 on the SAT math and reading sections, 730 on the writing, 2330 composite. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about you personally, too.
Yeah, so obviously I've tried not to ride on my laurels completely. I didn't go completely downhill after my perfect SAT score. So I worked really hard in high school, and I decided that I'd want to do really well on that test. I've always been sort of a good test taker, so I've got that sort of natural oomph to that. That probably helped me to start. And then I took a preparation course. Took a preparation course with Princeton Review, and that really helped me. That sort of set me on the goal to hey, I'm going to do as well as I can. I didn't expect that perfect score when I got it. I was like, wow, I can't believe this. I knew I would do well, but perfect. I was like, wow, this is beyond what I could possibly imagine.
No, that's great. And you also got some scholarship money as a result, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I did very well on the national merit. I did very well on my PSATs, and that qualified me for a national merit scholarship. And so I ended up getting a full scholarship to Maryland. It was 3 separate scholarships that were pieced together through the national merit program. And they ended up paying me a little bit of money for housing in the end once I moved off campus. So that was really nice.
No, it's pretty great. What else? What else do you do? What else keeps you busy?
Yeah. So since then, I've traveled around. I grew up in Maryland. I moved out to the West Coast for a bit, Seattle, Los Angeles, back to Maryland, and now I'm in New York City. So I've moved around a lot. I've done SAT tutoring in most of those locations, but I really just love to explore. I'm a naturally curious person. Now that I'm in New York City, I just bicycle everywhere and sort of take a look at places I haven't been to.
Awesome. What led you to get involved with tutoring?
So I was in a Princeton Review class, as I was mentioned, when I was practicing for the SAT, and I looked at the guy who was teaching the class. I was like, wow, I could do that.
This isn't that hard.
Exactly. And so I ended up working for the Princeton Review when I was in college, so I applied for that job. I got it. I did that for a few years working for the company, and then I went off on my own after that.
Nice. So what was the pivotal moment that led you to branch out on your own?
My mom referred me to someone, actually, so that was pretty cool. Before, I was just tutoring classes for the Princeton Review, and then my mom says, one of my friends is mentioning that her son needs tutoring for the SAT. Can you tutor him? Yeah, sure. That sounds great. And so my mom referred me to this mom who referred me to another mom, and there was a whole network of moms in Maryland who were referring me to one another. It was great.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the word of mouth is so huge in tutoring and in service in general. And, the cream really rises to the top,
Yes, that's right.
People feel passionate about it. Do you ever find that people are kind of embarrassed to mention that they offer tutoring and then not offer it, but that they use a tutor? How do you find students typically feel about that?
Well, it depends. I think with SAT, there's a lot of people have this expectation that you should have a tutor or you should at least do some sort of preparation. So there's no sort of stigma there. But certainly, I've helped a lot of kids in algebra and geometry and other class subjects, and some of them do feel kind of embarrassed or feel kind of slighted that they need to use a tutor.
How does that feel?
I always work with a student. I always try to develop a rapport with the student, and I can understand a lot of times the students are very smart but lazy, and they feel kind of annoyed at their parents that their parents have hired this tutor when they know the material, but the fact is that they need to work with a tutor so they do their work. And I sort of, I talk to them, I show them that I'm a human too, I'm not just some devil sent in by their parents, and I think that usually works pretty well.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm really curious about your story, how you got to that top SAT score. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you took the course, but was there any particular moment of insight that you had that led you to that breakthrough? Yeah,
so at the very least, I knew a lot of the material in terms of the math, and my vocabulary was pretty strong, so I had that. In terms of a breakthrough that I personally had when I was studying for the SAT, definitely plugging in your own numbers was really helpful for me, realizing that if I didn't know how to set up an algebraic equation for the problem, then I could just plug in my own numbers to the words and see what works. or plugging in the answers if that need be. I think I did a little bit of that myself in like tests in high school, but to make like a method out of plugging in your own numbers and make a method out of plugging in the answers was really helpful and sort of allowed me to conquer those problems that I didn't know how to set up in the first place.
So it's really about taking some of those tricks and then like systematizing them, making sure you're using them whenever you possibly can.
Exactly, that's right.
Absolutely, and that's something that I would suspect comes with practice.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I say to my current students is that a lot of it is just in practice. Like the more you see of a specific type of problem, the more used to it you're going to be. So if a student is having trouble with some specific aspect of geometry, I'll just drill them on that specific topic until they get bored of it, until they cry and say, no more of these. Because then they're used to it.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Now, how long did you spend overall studying?
It was a long time. I took a summer course in between my sophomore and junior year of high schools, and so that class, I think it ended up being maybe 2 or 3 times a week over the course of 2 to 3 months. That sounds about right. And then I had this internship over the summer where they basically just had me sit in a room and look pretty. So I was able to do a lot of prep work while I was doing my internship, which was really helpful.
Right, that's actually a really valuable insight. Like if you want to put in a lot of work for the SAT studying, which is most likely necessary for a lot of folks to get a top score, finding a place where you can just set aside that time and focus, and maybe at the same time, add something else to your resume too that isn't really that much work.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be a good strategy. But regardless, setting aside the time is really important. For a lot of folks, that's what they need to do. That's what they should do. But at the same time, we all know we should put in tons of time to lead to a top result. Malcolm Gladwell has his 10,000 hours rule, and it's no secret that practice makes perfect. But at the same time, there are lots of things that we know we need to put in the time for and should do, like also schoolwork, right? You also got your classwork, you also got homework, you got your extracurriculars. So what would be your advice for students who maybe don't have a ton of time to study for the SAT, trying to balance it all? I'm sure you have a lot of students who come to you last minute.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
The last month, the last 2 weeks, really crunch time, and they still, want to know, how can I get to 2,400? Mm-hmm. How can I get to that perfect 1,600 with only a month, with only a couple of weeks? I mean, maybe that's not realistic, but what can those students do to maximize their scores when they don't have a lot of time?
Yeah, so as you were saying, it's not realistic to expect to go from like a 500 to an 800 in just the period of a few weeks. Like those students, I always encourage parents to have their students enroll in tutoring as soon as possible because, of course, life comes up. These students often have extracurriculars and sports that take up a lot of their time. And so even if a student doesn't have that much time per week, if they start many weeks ahead of time, that's even better. But I realize your question is that, all right, so they've only got a few weeks, like what can you do? I often find that the math section is more responsive to tutoring than, say, the reading or the writing. Because with the reading, like you can develop huge stacks of vocabulary cards, and there's no guarantee that those vocabulary will be on the test or that the student will remember the stacks of vocabulary cards. So what I do is I go over the strategies like plugging in the answers, plugging in your own numbers, do some brush up on algebra and geometry with the student, and just really concentrate on that math section to bring up those math scores. And I've always seen that, yeah, even if we have 2 weeks with the student, their scores will respond to that.
That makes a lot of sense, definitely. Not all that vocabulary to learn. You can really focus on the math. Quick question, though. What happens if someone's already pretty high on math and they want to raise the reading?
That's a good question, yeah. So at least with the Princeton Review, one of their methods that I was taught in the Princeton Review that I found is really helpful in terms of the vocabulary section is to plug in your own word for the answer. So if you're reading a sentence and you're trying to fill in the blank, you want to come up with your own word for the blank and then compare it to the answer choices. And that's usually really helpful. I find a lot of students get distracted by the answers and they say, all right, well, this word kind of fits with the tone of the sentence, but if you plug it in, it doesn't make sense in terms of the meaning of whatever that exact word should be. And so I found that's pretty helpful. In terms of the reading, I really just drill them. I have them read a passage and I ask them, all right, what's the main idea of this passage? What is the author talking about? What are his views on this subject? And so I just constantly drill them with questions about exactly what the author is talking about. Some of them it's very difficult. Some of them are kind of used. Some of the students that I've had are very used to just like passively reading and not really getting much out of it. So those are kind of students that I struggle to work with. It takes a while to build that sort of active reading, but once they've got that active reading in place, it's kind of like a light bulb for them.
No, absolutely, Adam. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. For both the reading and writing, it sounds like what you're saying is kind of predicting or making up your own word, your own idea for what you need to solve. Because, if you just look at the answer choices, they only make sense in context.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where they're trying to trip you up. So if you kind of predict and engage a little bit before even looking at the choices, so kind of forgetting for a second that's multiple choice.
That's right.
In a way, maybe that could help. So that's definitely really valuable insight. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
One thing we really love to hear on College Admissions Toolbox are stories. Could you take us to the moment in time of the worst moment that you've seen or experienced in test prep, either you that you've experienced or one of your students?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll preface this by saying the vast majority of the time I've spent in test prep has been absolutely lovely. Like the parents are great, the students are great, but sometimes you have these things where kids badly behave or parents badly behave. So I've got one example of each.
Sure. Let's hear it.
So with a kid badly behaving, so I had this one student, and she was really well behaved, but her brother was not. And so I was tutoring the girl in SAT, and we were making a lot of really good progress. And the parents were like, "Adam, you're such a good tutor. We want you to help us with our younger son. Our younger son has behavioral problems. He's got ADD, and he refuses to do his summer math packet. And so could you come in and just sit there and make sure he does that summer math packet and help him with the problems?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I can do that. I've done stuff like that before." And so I get there, and the warning sign is the parents haven't told the kid that I'm going to arrive, because if they had warned him that I would arrive, he would run up to his room and lock himself up there.
Oh, no, I bet he wasn't happy to see you.
He was not. So he stayed on the couch, and he refused to leave the couch. He basically threw a temper tantrum. This is a ninth grader, so this kid is about 13, 14 years old. And I'm not Caesar Milan. I'm not the dog whisperer. Like, I can't put students off of couches. So the parents eventually just paid me for the half hour that I was there. and I didn't work with the student at all.
Wow. So in that case, it sounds like the parents learned a valuable lesson.
Exactly. That's right.
Oh, that's so funny.
And then the other example I've got is a badly behaving parent. Some of the parents are really involved in their child's education, and that's great. The problem becomes when they start micromanaging exactly what the work is. And there was this one family I was working with where the dad used the royal we whenever the kid did well on a test or did badly on his homework. It's like, we did badly on this test. We didn't do our homework. That was sort of a warning sign. At one time I was working with the kid, and I was checking the kid's homework. And after I checked the homework, the dad checked my checks of the kid's homework. And he was wrong, too. He didn't know what he was doing. Like, I didn't understand why he hired me if he wanted to check the homework himself.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a little bit of over-involvement there.
Exactly. That's right.
What are some tips that you would give a student maybe who has a parent like that?
Yeah, so it's hard, obviously, for a student. You've got to listen to your parents. But, I feel bad for the kid. All he had to do is he just had to deal with it and be polite and do well on his homework. And so eventually, once the kids do well enough, the parents start backing off and understanding that the kids know what they're doing.
Sure. So it sounds like it's something, that trust that just comes with time.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah, really demonstrating that the kid is putting in the work, and is getting the results. That could be the best way to kind of get the parent to take a little bit more of a back seat.
Yeah, but most of the families I work with, like, the parents understand that I'm an expert. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hired you.
That's right. And so in that case, they're just like, all right, do what you need to do and make sure those scores gets up. And it's usually pretty good.
No, sure. It makes a ton of sense. Thanks so much for sharing that, Adam. What about any light bulb moments you've seen with a student? Tell us about one of those.
So certainly I've had a lot of students that struggle with maybe a specific aspect of geometry, and I'll show them the formula and I'll have them memorize the formula. But I think over the years I've had a light bulb moment which has helped a lot of students with the SAT, specifically the grammar section of the test. And it's that the word being is never correct.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And so if you're going through the SAT grammar section has a part where you try to improve sentences and you try to select the sentence that's most grammatically correct and has the best flow. And a lot of times the students will select the sentence that sounds the most intelligent, but doesn't necessarily have flow or have grammatical correctness. And a lot of times those sentences have the word being in them, like being that this is true, Jonathan descended the hill. Well, that sentence sounds intelligent, but there's probably a better flow to that sentence that could capture it. And so whenever I see the word being in a sentence, I just circle it and I say, this isn't right. Like, don't even consider that sentence as the correct answer.
Well, that's such a great tip, and it's such a simple one. And I think students are probably always looking for things like that are always the case. So it's so valuable that you actually have one of those to share. Remember, being is never the answer. Keep that in mind. It's like the one thing you can count on, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's so funny, just because like it sounds like an academic-y thing that no one would ever actually say, but it sounds smart.
Exactly.
Maybe. But yeah,
the way I tell it to the students is being is a word that you would put in an essay when you're trying to pad the word count. Like it doesn't help the sentence, it just makes the sentence longer.
Yeah, that's a super useful tip. Thanks so much for sharing that, Adam. I bet, how did you feel when you came across that?
I was pretty happy, because I always worked with these students and they would consistently choose a sentence that was just absolutely horrible as the correct sentence. And so once I got that across to them, like it became much easier to tutor the writing section.
Wow, that's a great one. Thanks so much. I want to shift gears now, moving to my favorite part of the interview, which is the lightning round. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. You give me some rapid-fire responses. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. What's your number one piece of advice in college admissions and test prep?
Practice, practice, practice. It doesn't matter if you work with a tutor, if you take a class, or if you do self-taught SAT studying. You just need to practice. Take those tests over and over again until you've seen all the questions. Definitely.
Repetition review is so key. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to success?
Yeah, so stability. Some students get too stressed out about the test, and that hurts their performance. Some students don't care at all about the test, and that hurts their performance. So you need to be constantly motivated and not stress yourself out over it.
Definitely, so important. Reducing that stress, keeping the motivation going. What's one online resource that you absolutely love?
Yeah, so there's a website called Kuta Software. That's KUTA software.com. I discovered it over the course of talking with other tutors and talking with parents. And it's really good because it has a lot of problem sets that teachers themselves use to drill a specific topic. So let's say a student is having difficulty with simultaneous equations, or they're having difficulty with triangles. I can drill them on that specific topic over and over again, so I can use materials that are outside of the usual College Board and SAT study materials.
Wow, Kuta Software. We'll have to link to that one. Is that for both test prep and academic stuff?
It's both of that. Yes, exactly.
Nice. And is it free?
It's free. Yes, exactly. It's kind of a freemium model. So there are a whole bunch of free worksheets that you can use. And if you want to sign up to develop your own worksheets, you pay a little bit per month, and then you can create your own as well.
Oh, very cool. So it sounds like only the teachers are the ones who are likely to pay, but if you're student out there, you could use it for free. That's awesome. Good to know. I actually didn't know that one, so check it out. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without?
So the big blue book of college admissions, it's the official SAT study guide. And so that book is really useful because it includes actual SATs. And in fact, most of the time, like I've started working with clients that already have that book, like everyone I've worked with sort of knows. So for those who don't know, I encourage them to pick that book up because it has those tests. It doesn't have that good advice about how to calculate a test, but it does have actual tests that I can work with them on.
Definitely. Get those exams. So important. No, so thanks so much for joining us, Adam. What do you got going on these days?
Yeah, so I just moved to New York about 4 months ago. So really, I'm just exploring the city, working with new clients. I've got not only SAT and ACT clients, but I also work with GRE, which is the test to get into graduate school, and ASVAB, which is the test for placement in the U.S. military. So I've got a few of those specialized clients that it's really fun to work with them and exchange test prep advice.
Very cool. Change it up every now and then. Nice. Finally, where can folks find you online?
So I don't have a website yet. I will hopefully be putting that up soon. But you can reach me at my email at apurucker@gmail.com. So that's APURUCKER@gmail.com.
Awesome. We'll link to it in the show notes. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. Amazing advice. Take care. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thank you. Sounds great.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.